Hey ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. As always, it is Nick here, back with your daily crypto news and analysis. And today we are going to be talking about something very interesting, and I do believe that everyone should stick around until the end of this video because we have a lot to go over. And yeah, there's a lot of things that we need to prepare for, but this is probably one of the biggest things because it's been brewing for so long. And when this happens, well, I think everyone's going to wake up. It's going to be a major wake-up call for anyone out there that has not been focusing on one key player around all of this, and you'll soon know it. But here we have, from Anthony Pompliano's podcast, the real Ponzi is the fiat. The fiat currency has been consistently bailed out by the Fed printing and quantitative easing. That's the exact definition of what a Ponzi is. Now, this is from Greg Foss. That's his @ over on Twitter. And he's talking about fiat currency. And then he's talking about Bitcoin. He's a Bitcoin maxi, which again, as we do look at Bitcoin, I don't believe that is the one. We'll talk about that as well, probably in a little bit. But with all this in mind, listen closely.
Every single asset allocator out there needs to do their homework on Bitcoin, because just like myself in 2016, my first thought was, Bitcoin has to be a Ponzi. The reality, though, is you do some work, you see the blockchain in action, you see the beauty of math and code and decentralization, and you're like, my God, this is something I've been searching for 30 years. Why? Because the real Ponzi is the fiat. The fiat currency has consistently been bailed out by Fed printing and quantitative easing. Now, that's the exact definition of what a Ponzi is. Bitcoin is not the Ponzi. Bitcoin is the solution. And again, you got to have two parallel networks. I like talking with Jeff Booth about this. We don't want it to happen quickly, but we both believe over time it is inevitable, and you need to start this network transfer. Okay. And when you do a network transfer, as you know, you don't turn one network right off, right? You turn it, you transfer the network over time. I think we have 5 years, Pomp, but in Jeff Booth's words, we are going to see 100 years of change in the next 10 years. So who knows?
And although, again, you know, this is a Bitcoin maxi talking about how Bitcoin is the one that's going to save everything. It's not. We've talked about it. It's not great for financial stability in terms of financial use cases. It can't really scale and stuff like that. So it's not going to solve everything. Now, do I think that it could very well be a great, store of value? Technically, yeah, it can be. But, you know, again, as we do look at what's actually happening around the world, I think that outside of crypto, we should 100% be buying other things as well. We should be stockpiling physical gold and silver. We should also be buying, other things that are tangible assets like food and water and things like that, and stockpiling these things, because what could be happening within the next couple, months and years ahead could be pretty dark times. And that's not me trying to be, negative or anything like that. But when we look at what's been happening around fiat currencies and around the overall financial system, yeah, I don't think that anything is going to lighten up. I don't think that we are going to see, something come in and save everything. Because as we look at the dollar itself and the worth of the dollar, it has lost its value since day one. And a lot of the things that have pushed it down to where we are currently is what the Fed has done. There's a great chart over here that actually breaks everything down and the key events that caused it to completely slide. And it all started back here, where the Federal Reserve Act creates a central bank with the ability to manage the country's money supply. Boom, massive drop. And then here we have from the Great Depression, how the dollar basically reacted. We also do see over here, the US President Roosevelt criminalizes the possession of gold, and we all see the rest of history basically, pushing everything to where we are at now. And this is where we look at the price of things as well. Like, as you look at things happening around, the time frame here on what you could have bought with $1 compared to what you could buy today with $1, it truly puts things into perspective on just how bad our economy actually is, and how the US dollar as a fiat currency, as a world reserve currency, is practically useless. So why wouldn't individuals turn to Bitcoin and turn to crypto and turn to gold and silver, etc.? Because as we look at it, fiat has failed. The overall financial system has failed. And today, more than ever, we have a lot of things to look at and be warned about. One of the biggest things is Japan, right? We'll get there in a second. But first, I want to bring you guys to this as well. January 2nd, 2023, I seen this post and I actually saved it because I believe that we are about to see a major issue around liquidity. Although we keep seeing the idea around, oh, how the US economy's liquidity is golden, it's fine, it's safe, you can, keep your money in the, bank accounts, don't worry, the Fed has a limited amount of money. And like that to me is one, a warning sign of what's to come, but also it gives me a lot of confidence in the fact that I should be de-risking. I should be getting out of the banking sector. I should take my money out of the bank. I should keep my money in other tangible assets like gold and silver, etc. And we do see here, there is more than $80 trillion in hidden debts held by shadow banks and non-US banks. There are $650 billion in bonds and loans in distressed territory. We have unregulated stablecoins worth tens of billions of dollars. 2023, I'm sure we will hear the word liquidity often. Now, yes, we start to see that in March. We started to see banks collapsing. And again, our Federal Reserve and the Treasury kept telling everyone, hey, everything is fine. Everything is fine. And so far, things have been fine. But what happens when things aren't? Are they going to be there to protect you and your money? Absolutely not. Over here, again, from Gold Telegraph, we do see the Bank of America is warning the United States Treasury market is at risk of large-scale forced selling, the world's biggest bond market. Keep an eye on Japan. This goes all the way back to October 20th, 2022. And here was the source, by the way, as well. Now, what's very interesting about Japan is they are the largest holder of U.S. debt. And that is really going to come back to the U.S., and it all starts on what is happening over in Japan, going all the way back to January as well. Breaking news, the Bank of Japan has announced a fourth day of unscheduled bond buying operations. The money printer is not going burr, it's going berserk. The BOJ offered to buy unlimited amounts of 2-year notes at a yield of 0.03% and 5-year debt at a 0.23%. It also offered to purchase a total of 600 billion yen to $4.6 billion of 1 to 25-year bonds. So again, they were buying up everything, literally buying everything, as they were still seeing a liquidity crunch. They are still a holder of US debt. And we'll get to that here in a second. But over here, we do see in the fiscal year 2022, Japan experienced a significant surge in its trade deficit, which soared to an unprecedented $160 billion. It has roughly quadrupled. The Bank of Japan has purchased up all its financial assets, and now its trade deficit is at a record. History being made. And yes, as we look at what's happening over in Japan, it's trouble in paradise, right? And why does that matter to the US? Well, like I said, they are the number one holder of US debt. Over here, we do see Japan with $1.1 trillion in treasury holdings. Japan is the largest foreign holder of US debt. Japan surpassed China as the top holder in 2019 as China shed over $250 billion or 30% of its holdings in 4 years. Now, why does this matter? Why is this a big deal? Well, we look at Japan. Right? And as we look at Japan and what they have been doing and what's been happening since going all the way back to pretty much, I want to say the summer of 2022 is when we started to see problems with Japan. As we look at the Central Bank of Japan and we look at where they are at currently today and how much they hold of US debt, if Japan tomorrow, their central bank defaulted, well, guess what? We will see not only a collapse of the yen, but we will also see a large issue in Japan itself, but also we will see chaos within the financial system because all of this is going to spill over. In fact, we've seen this warning from the IMF. The IMF has warned that an abrupt change in Japan's ultra-loose monetary regime would have meaningful spillover effects on global financial markets. Many are sleeping on this theme, and this goes back to January 26th. It faces the challenge of maintaining its accommodative monetary stance to achieve its inflation target while avoiding overshooting and turmoil in currency and bond markets. And yes, as we look at what could happen, as Japan is the largest holder of US debt, when they do default, or if they do default, I should say, because we don't know if they are going to yet, just full transparency, but it looks as though their economy is slowing. It seems like it's going to be pretty hard for them to pay back this debt. And when and if they do collapse, not only will the yen collapse, but also the country itself will have a lot of internal issues, which could ultimately spill over into the US as well, because if they are the largest holder of US debt, well, the US is not going to get paid on that debt. We are going to see a debt default, a global debt default at that. Liquidity itself is also drying up. As much as our government wants to say, well, we'll just print more money. The problem with that is that, currently speaking, the purchasing power of the dollar is pretty much bare minimum. Like, you can't really buy much with the US dollar. Yes, it seems like you can when you go out to the store, but we all know everything is rising in price drastically. But the problem is that we haven't even seen hyperinflation yet. When we start to see debt defaults and we start to see, the US starting to print more and more money, and technically they don't even need to print more money, because what we will see is also the US dollar, as we do see globally, not being accepted, and a lot of countries and nations moving away from the US dollar. What we're going to see is a flood of the US dollar coming back into the US, and that will cause hyperinflation. Meaning, when we look down here in 2020, when a McDonald's coffee was $1, well, now it's maybe $10, maybe even more. Right? And the same goes for all of these items. Like, we'll probably see a lot more inflation. And when we see hyperinflation, it's going to cause an uproar within the US. And it's also going to be a big deal around the world as well. It's not just going to be internally in the US. This is going to be a global problem because, again, currently speaking, the US dollar is still the reserve currency. Now, the World Economic Forum also posted this about the US and Japan facing debt difficulties. The world's biggest and third biggest economies are both facing up to problems around debt. The US could face a fiscal crisis in the next few months after the government hit a $31.4 trillion debt ceiling. At the same time, the Bank of Japan has downgraded its economic outlook shortly after Finance Minister warned that the country's finances are becoming increasingly precarious. The U.S. Treasury has begun using extraordinary measures on cash management to try and hold off a debt default until June 5th. The country's debt ceiling is a legal limit on how much the federal government can borrow. It is set by Congress and was extended to its current level in December of 2021 following demands from the Democratic Party. That limit has now been hit following a standoff between the Republican-controlled House of Representatives and President Joe Biden's Democrats on lifting the debt ceiling again. And I love how they call it, more so they're playing into the idea that this is all political problems, when realistically speaking, it's financial problems within the US. And here we have the US hits debt ceiling, extraordinary measures kick in. And I mean, does this look sustainable to anybody out there? I mean, like, we are at well over $30+ trillion in debt. And we actually did hear the Treasury wanting to not only print more money, but also push the debt to $50 trillion by 2030. Mind you, that is nearly $18 trillion within the next 7 years. Let me ask you this. I know a lot of you out there, you don't have, financial degrees or anything like that. But listen, you don't need to be a rocket scientist. Let me ask all of you, do you believe that this is sustainable? Do you believe that the economy could sustain on another $18 trillion being printed within 7 years? Because look at the problems that we are facing right now. And from 2020 to now, by the way, we have printed a massive amount of money. I mean, the percentage of the US dollar in population in just the last 3 years has risen drastically. And you can see how unsustainable it has been on the economy. I mean, things are extremely expensive. So think about another $18 trillion. I mean, it has to be an absolute joke to think about, finance like this, especially being the Treasury. Like, how could the Treasury not, have any sort of idea on economic outlook, on finances, etc.? Like, this is who's playing the game around the US economy. And then you wonder why our spending power looks like this. Now, over here as well, if a default does happen, the US credit rating would decrease, leading to higher interest rates. That would put a strain on households and businesses, as it would translate into higher borrowing costs for cars, homes, and all other loans. The repercussions for the economy could lead to companies cutting jobs in huge numbers. And this is very interesting because guess what? We've already seen this. Facebook laying off 4,000 workers, Amazon laying off 9,000, Best Buy laying off 600, ESPN is laying off 7,000. Like, this is already happening. But we haven't even defaulted yet. We haven't even seen a major default. Everyone thinks that we're at the worst part of the economy right now. No. I even said it before in many videos. This is 2008 on steroids. What is brewing right now is going to be much larger than what anyone can anticipate. And we do see down here, Japan's government debt will exceed $8.47 trillion for the first time at the end of the fiscal year that runs to March of 2027. A draft estimate seen by Reuters shows as the country remains heavily dependent on borrowing. Japan's inflation rate has recently hit a 41-year high. This has kept alive expectations that the Bank of Japan could phase out its ultra-low interest rates. It opted to keep rates unchanged on January 18th to enable it to continue servicing its debt repayments, although some analysts do not expect this anytime soon because of uncertainty over whether wages will increase enough to offset rising living costs. And again, as we look at what's happening in Japan, like, it's trouble in paradise. And again, I say it with as much I want to warn you guys ahead of time, because if we do see Japan default, it doesn't just mean Japan. We will see a lot of issues coming right back to the US. And I want you all to understand that, like, as we look at the economy currently, yes, things are rough. Yes, things are still bad. Rent is ridiculous. I mean, groceries are ridiculous. Utilities, everything. We all know that inflation is brewing. Inflation is still going crazy. But the problem is that we haven't even hit the worst of this. We still have yet to get to that. This is also why I've told everyone to make sure that you are not only, investing into crypto, but also diversifying into physical gold, silver, food, water, stockpiling these things. Because right now, yes, it seems like things are expensive, but what's coming in the next couple months, even maybe it's a year, what is going to happen is going to drastically take the world by storm. Like I said, 2008 on steroids, because we have not slowed down. The money printer has not slowed at all. We have not learned our lesson from 2008. And I even argued that we have not learned our lesson from 2008, but we also haven't even bounced back since 2008. There's still a lot of issues that we are dealing with since 2008. So yes, do I believe that fiat currency is a Ponzi scheme? 100%. You don't need to be a rocket scientist. Like I said, once we've seen the Fed create that central bank, or I should say the Federal Reserve Act create that central bank, the Fed, right? That was game over for the US dollar. That was game over. And we have not turned back since. It's just been a complete downtrend on the US dollar's value and also the US economy. And this also leads to a downfall in all global economies. Hence why we are seeing these global economies moving away from the US dollar. So with that being said, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, definitely leave a like, subscribe, turn notifications on because I'm a free content. You guys are more than welcome to follow me on Twitter and join the free Discord in the description below. Others, up that you all have a beautiful day or a beautiful night wherever you guys are in this beautiful world. That's been Nick. Peace out, guys.